All right. Well, thank you for choosing this panel over the other panel. This one's going to be extraordinarily good. My name is Joe Bast. I used to be somebody. Now I'm just a senior fellow with the Heartland Institute. I am working on a book these days. You may have seen on page 19 of the program, there's a description of it. It's the fifth volume in the Climate Change Reconsidered series, and it specifically focuses on fossil fuels, the social cost of carbon, and the case for continuing to produce fossil fuels going forward. That book should be at the printer by the end of this month. It'll be released sometime in September, and I hope you'll all look at it either online or buy a copy of it. I was asked by Cork Hayden to pitch his book here to you all. Many of you know Cork, Howard Hayden. He goes by Cork. He has a book titled Energy, a Textbook. Really good stuff. It's entertaining. It's just fact-filled. It's an amazing publication. So maybe check it out. Energy, a Textbook by Howard Hayden. I think you'll enjoy it. All right, this panel is on CAFE standards, why they need to go. CAFE stands for Corporate Average Fuel Economy. Just last week, on August 2nd, EPA and the Department of Transportation announced that they were going to lock in the model year 2020 CAFE standards for model year 2026. In other words, they're not going to ramp up CAFE standards on new cars and trucks. CAFE standards require that all the new cars sold in the United States, the average fuel economy of all the new cars sold in the United States, meet a certain mile per gallon threshold. The Obama administration ramped that up dramatically in the last month or two that it was in office. And the Trump administration now has come in and said, no, we're not going to ramp them up. We're going to keep them at the previously set 2020 level. EPA and the Department of Transportation think that freezing CAFE produces social benefits by reducing the price of new cars and by ending or postponing the process of lightweighting cars in order to improve their gas mileage. When you lightweight a car, you make them less safe, and it results in more traffic fatalities. So in those two ways, EPA and the Department of Transportation estimate significant social benefits, $2,340 per vehicle, and a social benefit of $500 billion over the next 50 years. Only government agencies can imagine that they can forecast something over 50 years, but that's their estimate. This is really good news. This is good news. After 8 years of President Obama relentlessly campaigning against fossil fuels, we have a president who is willing now to stand up for fossil fuels and, more importantly, for the men and women who have to buy cars and trucks and respect their freedom of choice. Before I introduce our panelists, I want to make just three quick, easy points. In response to EPA's announcement last week, General Motors said, our goal is zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. Zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. That is impossible, right? And it's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. Zero of each of those things means zero cars. It means zero respect for people's personal choices of transportation. It would have a devastating effect on the economy and on every one of us if we no longer had cars and trucks in the United States. The point is, GM is not our ally here, and we are not carrying water for GM or Ford or Chrysler or any of the other companies. As we see more and more in the last couple of decades, big corporations are willing to throw their customers under the bus when it comes to either appearing to be green or appeasing an administration. And it's no different in this case. So car and truck manufacturers aren't necessarily our friends in this debate. The second point is trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by reducing emissions from cars and trucks is a foolish endeavor right from the beginning. There's lots of economic analysis that tries to estimate the cost of reducing emissions per ton, and then they compare it from one sector to the next. How does the cost of reducing a ton of emissions from electric production compare to the cost of improving mileage for cars and trucks? Well, it turns out reducing emissions from cars and trucks is really expensive because the social benefits from transportation are so large. So if you care about global warming, don't start with cars and trucks. It's a trivial contributor. It's a very expensive way to make a difference. You should move on to other things. And then finally, my third point concerns federalism, because this comes up often. California has its own standards. 12 other states, or 13, is it a total of 13 states? And DC have adopted California standards. There's a concern that this means California is mandating a higher CAFE standard for the rest of the country, because big car companies would need to produce cars for two different markets, the California market and everybody else. An economist named Tom Walton has really schooled me on this issue. Tom used to work for GM for many, many years, really brilliant economist. He said, don't worry about that. He said, car manufacturers can easily accommodate the different requirements between California and the rest of the country. Their platforms are flexible enough, their manufacturing process are flexible enough that they can change the types of cars that they sell in different markets. They do it all the time. They produce over 1,000 variations on their basic models. So they could handle this. Don't shed a tear for big car companies because now they've got two different markets that they have to produce cars for. And he said, better than that, CAFE is a national standard. So if California wants to raise its standard really high, that has the effect of lowering the requirement, the miles per gallon requirement for other states. So big car companies can meet the goal by selling bigger, heavier cars outside of California, thanks to California being willing to buy only lightweight, high-mileage vehicles. So Tom did the math. He said that if California went to 50 miles per gallon, the CAFE standard for the rest of the country would be 22.2 miles per gallon. That even big trucks can do that. And if California said, well, we're going to insist on 119 miles per gallon, that's EPA's estimate for the fuel economy of an electric car, a Chevy Volt. The EPA for the rest of the country would drop to 19.5, which would be terrific. So what we ought to be doing is patting California on the back, saying go right ahead and impose your own CAFE standard, be as restrictive as you want to be, because it actually benefits the rest of the country. It increases our freedom of choice outside of California. If you're in one of those 12 states that has adopted California standards, you should talk to your legislators and say, why in the heck are we doing that? Let's get off of California standards. Let California bear the burden of trying to save the world by reducing auto emissions. All right, we have three terrific speakers on this panel. The first speaker is going to be Dr. Sterling Burnett. Sterling is a Heartland Institute Senior Fellow on Environmental Policy and Managing Editor of Environment and Climate News. Before he joined Heartland in 2014, he worked for 18 years with the National Center for Policy Analysis. He has a PhD in applied philosophy from Bowling Green State University with a specialization in environmental ethics. He's going to be followed by Nicholas Loris. Nick is a research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. He's the Herbert and Joyce Morgan Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. He writes about energy supplies, energy prices, and other issues involving environmentalism. He has a master's degree in economics from George Mason University and a bachelor's degree from Albright College. And the third speaker is Sam Kasman. Every panel needs a lawyer, I guess, so we got stuck with Sam. Sam is general counsel for the Competitive Enterprise Institute, which is Heartland's favorite sister organization in Washington, D.C. He's a graduate of Cornell. He has a law degree from, SUNY Buffalo Law School. State University of New York, Buffalo. He's the author, you may have seen it in April, he had this great piece in the Wall Street Journal titled, Coffee Won't Kill You, But Cafe Might, which I thought was outstanding. Sam has been on this issue from the very beginning. We all know that lightweighting vehicles causes death. Sam was one of the guys who was forcing the bureaucrats to confront that fact in litigation and op-ed pieces and endless meetings. So for 30 years, this guy's been on the front edge of the anti-CAFE standard campaign. So we're delighted, in all seriousness, to have Sam Kasman join us. So without further ado, please welcome up here Sterling Burnett.